meeting. Is Tim here? There he is. Tim, I'd like to talk about cemetery fee increase.
Sure, just to kind of put it in a nutshell from the memo, what you have in front of you is by resolution to adopt some fee increases for Highland Park Cemetery. It's our only cemetery within the city of Casper. It's moderate increases to basically keep up with the rates that you see around the state and actually around the region. We compared to quite a few different places, Mr. Mayor, to everything from Pocatello, Idaho to Bellevue, South Dakota and such. And, that's in a nutshell what it is. It's nothing really high dollar. It puts us still just kind of in the middle of the range. Still about 30% less than what you'll see as some of those higher comparables. And it's just to keep up with the cost to maintain the facility. And if you recall from the budget that y'all just looked at, we're going to be investing about $762,000 into doing the phase 2 of that cemetery. So hopefully that this will help us just kind of keep up with that increased cost of that increased land space that we'll be taking up. Overall, we're expecting about overall, we're expecting about $20,000 additional revenue is what we see annually with the proposed increases. Of course, that's based on just pro forma what we sell. So I'll entertain any questions that you have.
Yes.
How much does it cost for a plot up there now?
So right now, like like a adult plot, typical is about $600, and what you'll see go to is $700.
Are there other prices for different size stakes?
Yeah, so there's different prices for, say, like infant. So the plot in that case is still free. It'll remain free for kind of some obvious reasons. Then we also have like the highest plot size we have is like for mausoleum, which you don't really see much this day and age, but we still address it in the resolution, and that's $2,100.
So do you sell plots to like a family who wants like 6 people all in the same place?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, exactly. They can do a variety of different things to even like a plot and layer your family members like in there in a certain manner. You could have 2 side by side and have a family of 4, let's say. So people do buy them out like that so that they can have their family members all around them.
How many people can they put on a plot if they cremate everybody? I get asked these questions, so that's why I was curious.
That's a good question, Mr. Mayor. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip a little bit. I want to say it's like 8-ish when you're talking about cremains. And then we also have another facility where we can put cremains in, which is above ground. It's much smaller, where you can just buy a niche, is what they call them, and insert your loved ones into there.
How many people are buried up there now? You know?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd have to get back to you on that one. It's a lot, and it goes back a long ways to where we have parchment paper that records, names of family members on it, and we keep it in a vault and everything. It's pretty neat. A lot of history up there for sure.
Bob.
Have we ever looked at putting in I'm not sure what they call it, where you have little vaults just to put a couple of urns in, like they have out at the Vet Cemetery?
Mr. Mayor, that's kind of what I was referring to earlier.
Okay.
We have, and it's even got a plan, so we only have one block in it. It's about yay big. And then we have plans like in the phase 2 expansion, and as we use that space up, it'll arrange in kind of a circle and stuff, and then we'll beautify it and stuff so that people can buy numerous of those niches, if you will.
Okay.
Other questions for Tim?
Were there any other increases that we didn't talk about?
Mr. Mayor, the main increase that you haven't seen in prior resolutions was the mausoleum one. We just never addressed it before, so that one is put in this resolution. Other than that, the resolution does a pretty nice job of striking through what those individual increases are. Like I said, there's a bunch of different ones because you're buying plots, plus you're buying the service fees, and some of them are staying the same, and then some are increasing to keep up with comparisons.
Mayor, my only question, it doesn't have to do with the rates or anything like that, but you can the things for interring cremains. If you're not cremated, do you have to still be in a vault and a casket and all that stuff, or can they just throw you in the ground? and I'm just curious.
Mr.
wrap it
Mayor,
up.
Councilman,
Wrap
that's a
it
great
up.
question, because I had
Yeah.
the same question.
Yeah,
And it turns out, kind of the state of Wyoming, you can just get basically put in a hole.
get a
up there,
burlap sack and,
just like the old days.
okay, I just was curious.
A cheap suit.
I'm not planning, like next week or.
Yeah, it's
Very
a special
Shirt.
request.
Get wearing that shirt.
Burial at sea's
McCarthy
cheaper.
would have admired it.
Burial at sea's cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tim, I know
Yep.
several years ago, we talked about this before on council, and I know there was a discussion about some of the other, in comparison to other places like in town that have burial plots, in relation to prices in comparison to them. Do we still fall pretty well below them?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know about all of them, because we didn't look at all of them, but I think on a service in facility type, there's really no one in Casper, the surrounding area, that probably is in the same level that you'll see at Highland Park Cemetery.
That's what they had said to us several years ago, that
Yeah, and so what
they
we
made
did,
that
Mr.
suggestion
Mayor,
about,
was,
we should really raise the rates. And so-
yeah, and so we looked around the region to kind of see some comparable facilities, and that's what you'll see in the memo that we've outlined as far as towns that we looked at, Cheyenne being the closest.
I had one more question.
Yeah, you better go.
How many grave sites are open for purchase?
That's a great question, Mr. Mayor. Right now, we have a really low inventory, and if you remember, we kind of talked about that when we were talking about budget and this phase 2 expansion. So we have a few hundred left, and we figured it's maybe about a 3-year supply, if you will. The issue that we have right now is a lot of them are like low as far as desirability, because they could be in like an alkali patch or someplace that's kind of out of the way, or maybe not in the bulk of everything. And so to kind of shed some light on that overall, that's kind of why we ranked it so high as far as putting this phase 2 expansion, so we could have more desirable plots and increase our inventory for years to come.
Something that just occurred to me, Mr. Mayor, that's like what happens nowadays if there's like a concert, scalpers buy all the tickets and then they triple the price. So I wonder if somebody could buy all of these plots, get a deal from the city, and then sell them for 3 times as much. I'm only kidding. Somebody will think of it.
Got a quarter of the market?
This goes on and about everything else.
Any other questions for Tim?
Actually, I thought of the same thing.
Thanks, Tim.
After that,
Everybody's good to go with the increase? Anything on the agenda that we wanted to touch base on or talk about? I know Mike had brought up one thing. And that got answered, Tom answered that.
One thing that I'm concerned about, but I don't know whether it really got straightened out in this, that is if the actual physical building of the potential future police station is on the Capitol.
just engineering study.
I think it just said a study, but it didn't state it. Just that makes me feel comfortable that we're aiming at actually getting the building.
You know, Tom, how that's stated in the,
Mr. Mayor, yes, it is in the budget, but it is for engineering and for site, type of work and site visits. There's nothing in the budget for the hard construction, but this first phase will certainly just be looking for the proper location and doing some engineering studies to make sure that the location will work.
Okay. Do you know when that'll be done?
I don't,
Doesn't have a time element.
certainly the funds will be available July 1st upon approval of the budget. And then it'll certainly be up to, you know, police and engineering to move that forward.
Has a location been tentatively selected, or is this study partially a location search?
Last I knew, just like Tammy said, it's in engineering stages. I've heard nothing on the location.
Okay.
Sean?
Bob had an idea of where it should be.
I just had a question on the local assessment district liens. So I remember we talked about sending a letter out to people. Is that what this is, or is this?
Yeah, that was exactly Mike's question.
Yeah,
Great,
so-
great
And he-
question.
Sorry, I wasn't-
No, it was just
Great
between these two
question.
guys anyway, but you can answer that for everybody if you'd like, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, it is entirely different. These particular individuals have paid off their assessment.
Okay.
And this is strictly to release the lien that was in
Okay.
place upon the implementation of the assessment. So this is good news, that they paid it off, and we need to let the county know that they released the lien.
Anything else on the agenda?
For the people that have it paid, subject to 6 months in jail and probation and all that stuff.
And/or,
Huh?
and/or.
I like or. I like the or. I like what's his name wants to do.
So you
Jail
only-
or.
It's only 21 or 18.
The only other thing was the summer conference voting delegate selection. Charlie and I were just talking. I'm gonna try to make it maybe one day. That week's pretty tight for me, but Charlie's the only one going down. And was anybody else thinking about trying to go to Wham this summer?
Where was it?
Down in Pinedale
Next week,
next week. Yeah.
Wednesday through Friday. If anybody's on the fence, it would be helpful because I'm on the board, and the board is meeting at the exact same time as the resolutions committee, which may sound like torture, but it's pretty important, because those are the statements that WHAM makes to the legislature about priorities. And I can't be at two places at the same time.
So I might try to go down Wednesday for that committee meeting. Try to swing down there. Dallas.
Something I found out the other day from Steve Harshman was there's a law that takes effect in July. I'm sure Charlie knows all about it. Where you can borrow money from the mineral trust fund for 1.5% interest. Because I was talking about this police station building, and why doesn't the legislature just give us a check? Of course, when he quit laughing, he told me that this July date's coming in where we can borrow the money for 1.5%. So for those of you who are going to be around and are interested in that, that's a pretty nice little resource. You don't have to raise any taxes, apparently. And you have 25 years to pay it off, maximum. I'd like to borrow a little of that money myself.
But just comment on that, it was an interesting discussion. One of the problems with it is, what are you gonna use as collateral? The road that you built, or the bridge that you built. And so, if the city defaults, what happens at that point? So it is, and you do have to pay it back. You're basically encumbering future councils with that debt, so, if we wanna go down that road, we just gotta be careful.
So where do you do the events and
Just want to see if anybody was going to try to table
Well, so we can talk about it more?
so we can talk about the food trucks. I'm sure nobody's going to do that today.
Is there anything, I've got a couple
Yeah,
things.
go right
to bring
ahead.
up. First off, thank you all for doing the judge selection in my absence. If for whatever reason it doesn't work out, I'll point out to everyone that I wasn't there. So, I think.
Three people weren't here.
Yeah, I don't always find myself in agreement with our local paper, but I am in agreement that we scrapped our code of ethics and we should come up with a replacement. And John did present an alternative to us at that time that I think we should consider, or at least begin a process where we have some kind of a code that we hold ourselves to. And I understand the reasoning behind jettisoning the old code, but we should have something in place, so I don't think we should lose track of that. Like all of you, I'm very concerned about finding out this news about this legacy fund. And I think we have an obligation to the event center in Hogan. I think we have an obligation to find out who came up with this idea of a legacy fund. I never heard of it before, and somehow it was in the budget. Maybe it was there and I just didn't see it, but I want to find out who created that term and how did those subsidies end up in that. I thought we were paying them off annually.
So did I.
Apparently we were not. So, and it may not change anything, but for future reference, that just can't happen. So, and I trust you, Tom, and I trust Carter to not do something like that, but somebody created that fund and never told us, and that's not a good thing.
Go ahead, Dallas.
So I did have a chat with some people about that, and it's been going on for about the last 5 or 6 years. It's actually when you've been on the council, you and Bob, and it was started with Patterson and flowed through McDonald. And you just weren't advised of it for whatever reason. And people apparently have not wanted to advise the council of it. But the accounting on it hasn't been presented. The auditors have known about it, that we pay. And so somehow it's gotten by everybody. With respect to the code of ethics, I agree, Charlie. What my thought was is we get rid of the old one, and then unless you've enjoyed the way we have done the food truck ordinance, which is making amendments and taking 3 months, I propose that what happens is that Henley draws something up, we look at it at several work sessions until everybody's happy with it, and then introduce it knowing that it's gonna make it through at least our votes, and not spend all this time on something that really doesn't need that much time. My main thought, and I know that the thing is gonna be the most difficult, but it's one that needs to be addressed. The only thing I can see as problematic, and you had a one-time problem. You could have another one, but the main thing that's problematic is conflicts of interest. And that really does need to have some good thought and some fine tuning and some understanding, because Mike's harped on, if we were lawyers and we did this, what trouble we'd be into, but we can't hold people to the standard they hold lawyers to. Because we're held to that standard because of our client's money and what we're doing for the client. This is for the city. But I don't think that if you make too harsh of a stand on conflicts of interest, it'll be difficult for laymen to run for office and understand when they have a conflict. Because I'm really not sure that anybody here truly understands conflicts of interest from the level that Mike and I do, because we've had to deal with it and we've been on committees that drew them up and where they become problems for lawyers. But the biggest issue is what the public perceives of us if we vote on certain things, where we have an obvious potential conflict of interest. So if I went around the table and said, "What? Everybody give me their definition of a conflict of interest," I think it'd be different. Mine is, my definition is I will not vote on anything that can affect me, my family, or anybody really that I know that I have some business dealing with. Travis Taylor had his liquor license. I abstained from that because he was thinking about renting a spot from a client of mine. I thought that was a conflict of interest. It didn't affect me financially at all, but it could affect the overall appearance of it. So it's a problem. I mean, there's conflict problems on this council right now. And if people vote on things that they think they should vote on, maybe they shouldn't be voting on. But if you get into this, it's gonna take a little time to fine tune it and get everybody to understand it, so you can feel like the average person who would come in here could understand it and perceive it and deal with it without any problem.
Well, the process you described is exactly what I had in mind. Just to have a proposal and work on it in a couple of work sessions and see how it comes out.
Chris and then Mike.
I think we should start with the state statute that covers that.
Okay.
And see if there needs to be anything amended on that. If not, just, because we're covered by a state statute now.
John, wasn't that the basis of what you drew up?
It probably was at least 80–85% of what I had.
Okay.
It was probably what, John?
About 80–85% of what the proposal was initially.
Because I agree with what Chris said. I would just as soon see that we just simply adopt the state statute and do nothing else other than
Wanna go
adopting the state statute.
Why don't we just schedule a time to look at them side by side? That'd be a simple way to do it.
Is everybody okay with that?
I just wanted to offer one other little thought for everybody to think about as you start thinking forward, what we might or might want to do in this regard. You know, as far as voting, if you know, we're all members of the community, And if you're gonna vote on something and it benefits you individually the same way that it benefits everybody else in the community, then that's not a conflict. Where it is a conflict is if it benefits you just a little bit better, more differently than everybody else, then that's something you need to kind of look at. One of the other things in this business relationship stuff can be kind of a tricky thing, because I think about when, and now his name escapes me, that owned Wyoming Stationery, was on the county commission. And the time would come that the county commissioners needed to buy office furniture. Well, the best place in town to buy good quality office furniture at that time was at Wyoming Stationery. And so he would abstain from voting on those things. And, you know, and he, you know, his business just really dealt with all of that in a very honorable and above the board's manner. I think that the real problem comes in when, if all of a sudden you have a council member or commissioner or someone like that that's sitting there going and saying, well, Mr. Department Head, tell me about blah, 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 or something, and they're blurring those lines, and that's
Hypothetical.
When you start getting into blurry areas,
the
then it
situation we
becomes
were in.
difficult and tough to deal with that by rule. But I just wanted to offer those general thoughts for everybody to kind of be thinking about as we go forward with this. Because I absolutely agree with Charlie that I think we need to, you know, we need to have something in place.
May I make a comment?
Charlie and then Dallas.
Are we still on the code? If you have something on the code.
Yes, I have something on the code.
It's 5:56, so real quick, guys.
The conflict of interest in what I'm told, not anybody correct me if I'm wrong, I was told when Edquist was on here, he didn't vote on any of his own contracts. Is that true? He would abstain from voting on his contracts?
Generally true. Yeah,
So.
but that really wasn't the issue.
Okay, well, and I guess.
Abuse of staff was the issue.
Well, the one
And his position.
where he called Beamer the name,
Pardon?
where he called Beamer the name, is that the one?
Well, that was not the only incident.
You'd have to read Mr.
Was there a conflict of interest
Mr.
though that
Reed's
you
report.
perceived? Or
There was
just
a conflict of
being
interest in
abusive?
my mind when he got on council. If you're gonna bid on multi-million-dollar contracts and be on council, I see that as a conflict.
Well, and so, see, that's my point. When he mentions the guy that owned Wyoming Stationery, he's selling his product to the county. And then, the hospital board, which I was on, a certain person got on there that owned a store like that, and so, and they bought all of her products. And I'm going, and the conflict of interest I saw there were mind-boggling to me, because they had an MRI where they needed to surround it with plating, and they wanted the hospital to pay for it, but all the doctors owned it. So,
My purpose in bringing this up was not to initiate the conversation, but to schedule it.
Thank you.
One last thing, I think I mentioned this last time, that we would like to have a social get-together. Lorraine and I looked at our calendar, and we're gonna tentatively offer to host a barbecue for council members and their significant others and department heads on August 11th, which is a Saturday. And we'll see how many people come. If it's just Lorraine and I and way too much food, that's what it'll be, but we'd really like to have everyone there and spend some time talking about things other than city business.
Thanks. All right, guys.
So I'll bring it up again, but
Thanks,
that's
Charlie.
the first notice.
So answer the question of the 24,000 feet.
I think half of them are.
Yeah, a lot of history.
I have a great-great-grandfather that was born in 1850.
How are you? I'm doing great, Virginia.
Andrea, good to see you again.
Go ahead, Councilman Laird, if you want to say something before we get started.
I would like to propose a moment of silence for the children in this country that are abused, starved, hurt in many ways, emotionally and physically, and who are being injured in various areas we'd have never believed years ago. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman. I now call the June 5th, 2018 regular council meeting to order. Would council members please denote your presence by depressing your yes switch?
All council members are present.
Council meetings are also televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the May 15th, 2018 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on May 25th, 2018.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Vice Mayor Powell. Corrections? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With Councilmember Humphrey abstaining, motion passes.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the May 15th, 2018 executive session.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Councilman Morgan. Corrections? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the May 29th, 2018 executive session.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Morgan, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Corrections? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With council members Powell and Walsh abstaining, motion passes.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve by minute action the June 5th, 2018 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Abstentions? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
At this time, we have Dave Park and Roger Walters that are here to speak regarding the 20th anniversary of the College National Finals Rodeo. Gentlemen?
Mayor, members of the council, Cindy, we do start the College National Final Rodeo, we refer to it as CNFR. It is the 20th anniversary. This has been a great event for the city of Casper and for the county of Natrona. And before I forget, Thursday night, we would like to invite each of you to come, all of you to come with your families, and you'll be introduced to the crowd during the intermission of the rodeo. So we hope we see all of you there Thursday evening. I don't want to go too long, and we promised we'd be short, but I thought some brief history might be a little of interest to you. In 1999, which was the first year, total revenue generated by the CNFR was $62,132. Jumping ahead 5 years to 2004, we raised $113,928. In 2010, we raised $160,561. Last year, we raised $255,700. So that shows the growth of the CNFR over the time it's been here. We have a great deal of response from public sponsors, from local sponsors. This year, we raised more money for sponsorship than we did last year. We now have a number of events for the contestants, including the golf tournament, softball tournament, for which we want to thank Councilman Walsh for all his efforts in helping us set that up. And we also have on Saturday, the final Saturday, a Special Olympics rodeo, where the rodeo contestants that are still in town come in the morning and meet Special Olympians and show them around. This is an extraordinary event, and if you have not seen that, I would encourage you to be there. Many of the contestants have been here before and have established friendships with the Special Olympians and some of the coaches. We have one coach who takes a picture every couple of years with the young girl and keeps that in his office, keeps that picture every year. That is a remarkable event to watch those rodeo contestants and those Special Olympians get together. This is an event which, as far as I can determine, has no downside. We bring in about 400 college kids, most of whom are here for most of the week. We have not had an arrest in 9 years. It's an extraordinary group of young people. Now, when I talk to the parents and coaches, they kind of roll their eyes. I know these kids aren't angels. I know some of them get away with something, but I don't think you can find another event where they have 400 college kids in one place for a week and have a record like that. They do a number of things for the community as well, in addition to the Special Olympics rodeo. This year, we are giving 2,700 vouchers to the school system and inviting school students to come to the SLAC on Monday and Tuesday. Those of us who grew up here in Casper remember we used to get the Shrine Circus tickets on the last day of school. We're doing the same thing with college rodeo. So we also give back to the community in that event. It has been an extraordinary honor and pleasure for me to be with the college rodeo for 18 of these 20 years. And one of the things that I have enjoyed most is getting to meet Roger Walters, who is the commissioner of the National Intercollegiate Rodeo Association. He wants to say a few words, talks a little funny, so I'll stand by to translate it.
Howdy! No, not really. On behalf of College Rodeo, I would like to express our sincere gratitude for this community and what it has done for the sport of college rodeo and our student athletes. This event has been branded by your town, your community. If you CNFR is, they're gonna give you that deer in the headlight look. But if you say Casper, oh, that's a balance, that's a balance. Casper has branded itself to a point that that's what our students work for. They don't work for the CNFR, they work for Casper. A tremendous job. I have been here at all 20 of these, every last one, in different capacities. For the last 10, I have been commissioned. I cannot thank you enough as a city council, as a city, for what you do for us. You embrace us, the people of your town embrace us. There's not a negative place. This is the best venue for college rodeo in the United States. There's no doubt about it. Last time, pretty close to this location, we signed a 10-year contract to be here through 2022. I'm not going to be here in 2022. I got 4 more years. But I hope at that point before, we will increase the length of time, because there's not a better thing for college rodeo than Casper, Wyoming. You are a tremendous group. You go out of your way to support us, and there are not enough accolades or thank yous that I can say to you as a council for what you do. Our student athletes appreciate you. Our coaches appreciate you. And we appreciate the hospitality that Casper gives to us. We had an injured student last year that was very seriously injured, and he had to stay in the hospital here for almost 2 months. Everybody here went out of their way to do something for that young man and his family, and he's from Australia. That just shows what this community is about. They have big hearts, and they open everything in every way. Now, on behalf of College Rodeo, I'd like to present this plaque, right this way, bad that way, for 20 years of supporting College Rodeo in such a way that it makes us proud to be a part of it. And you have done more than your share of promoting it and causing us to have an outstanding college final. So, Mayor, I'd like to come around there.
Yeah, please come up.
And present this to you. This, give it to you on behalf of College Rodeo. We thank each and every one of you. Some I've seen before for a while, and others I hadn't. This one I get to look at once a month. But thanks again from the deep bottom of my heart. Thanks for what you do for us.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
See you, Roger. Mr. Mayor, maybe a photo back here.
Is that what y'all like?
I think that would be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Dave, you need to be around here too.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to need the judge to give me a pass because I'll be out of town for 4 days over that area. Well, let me get my lawyer. I get a ruling from him.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Did you get what you needed, Flora? Okay.
All right.
Dallas, Dave already ruled, so we,
I'm in trouble, I know that.
both of us.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman, could you tell us what the schedule is again?
Yeah.
Because there's an opening dinner that we're invited to, and what day, what evening is that? And then there's also the Thursday, which is what, the 14th?
Yeah, so you've got this Wednesday, the 6th, the mixer at Fremont Motors, 6 p.m.
tomorrow.
And that's at Fremont Motors.
Fremont Motors, yeah. And then 14th. Thursday, the 14th is for recognition during the rodeo for city and county officials. And if you would send me, I was going to just shoot you guys an email as well for a reminder. If you'd send me if you're interested on going, so I can get tickets waiting for you at the will call.
And what are the hours of the mixer, as long as you're doing this?
6, I believe.
Starts at 6.
Okay,
Starts at 6 tomorrow.
okay. Thank you.
Councilman Hopkins.
Mayor, before these two gentlemen get away, we appreciate your thanks to City Council and the City of Casper, but you guys have made this happen. There is no other way around it. If you hadn't done it, it might not have gotten done. So I just wanted to thank you.
Well, you're thanking us, but from my standpoint, I want to reiterate, now, I'm not going to talk very long. For something to be successful, you have people inquiring to, hey, would you look at our venue? For about 10 years, nobody inquired. You have made it such a success, you, this community, that everybody thinks they want to see an FR. But the best venue for us is right here, Casper, Wyoming. There's no doubt about it. And I believe from deep as I can be, and you know, as Dave said, I may have an accent, and that's relevant to where you are. But the fact is, this is the place for college rodeo. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much.
I'd like to say we know rodeo. I think there's a Garth Brooks song, We Know Rodeo. But I'm going to be gone. I'm going to miss it this year. I'm sorry.
Thanks, gentlemen. Please read the consent agenda titles.
Establishing June 19th, 2018 as the public hearing date for consideration of the following 4 items. Public hearing for review of 8 ordinances adopting the various 2018 editions of the International Building Codes, adoption of the fiscal year 2018 budget amendment, adoption of the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget, and the transfer of ownership for retail liquor license number 7, owned by Love Holdings LLC, doing business as C85 at the Branding Iron, located at 129 West 2nd Street, to 129 Hospitality LLC, doing business as C85 at the Branding Iron, located at 129 West 2nd Street.
Chair to entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish public hearing dates just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the amendments to the municipal code pertaining to wireless communication facilities. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Yes, Your Honor. We have 2 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from me, John Henley, to J. Carter Napier, dated June 5, 2018. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated May 15, 2018.
Thank you. Acting City Manager report.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll recall that the council recently updated the municipal code to reflect changes in the federal law that governing zoning standards and procedures for wireless communications. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the regulations and provided some suggested changes for adoption that would make the changes be more distinctive for the city of Casper. The changes are included in the ordinance before you this evening for your consideration.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes, and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the wireless communication facilities to please approach the lectern. Those who wish to speak in favor. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving the wireless communication facilities, please approach the lectern. Those who wish to speak in opposition. There being no one to speak for or against the issues involving the wireless communication facilities, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance amending section 17.12.124 of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to wireless communication facilities.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Humphrey, seconded by Councilman Powell. Discussion. Councilman Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question for perhaps our city attorney or acting city manager. We had paid a considerable amount of money for the consultant to bring forward an ordinance for the city of Casper. So I'm curious, is there any sort of a change order for this particular ordinance? Are we paying for this, basically, is what I'm asking.
Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Your Honor. There is no change order in that regard. In fact, this was all generated via the Planning and Zoning Commission. We had done this, and the Planning and Zoning Commission had met just prior to the third reading, so they really hadn't had much of an opportunity to have input. And by the time we looked at the ordinance and when it was going to be coming up for a vote, we decided just to let the ordinance go through, be passed, and then come back. So all of this work was generated from our office. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Questions?
If I may.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think for people's awareness of what this is about, and my memory may be a little hazy on this because it's been several months since we talked about it, but a lot of this has to do with the location of towers and the physical, the actual towers and how they look cosmetically in our community, so that we have a little bit of say in where they go and how they look. And there is a range of towers in terms of their construction and their visual impact. And this ordinance, as I recall it, gives us some influence in terms of how they are located and the visual impact that they have on our community. Some of them just look like big refrigerators mounted on a pole, not something we would want in our downtown, for example. And so if I remember correctly, that's a big part of this, is so we can have a little bit of influence on the impact that these facilities have.
Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Council will now discuss the ordinance for the mobile vendor parking permit. Because this is not on the consent agenda, it will be open for discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance establishing mobile vendor parking.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Powell, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Council now listen to citizens that have signed up to speak on this topic. Please remember, public comments are for only 5 minutes, and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. Mr. Rob Caputa, please come forward.
I just had a question. Is there anything anybody could tell us that we haven't already heard?
Guess we'll find out.
Twice or 3 times?
Good evening, everyone. Rob Caputa, 4370 South Poplar Street. I have something I wanted to read. I was just kind of off guard last council meeting that we discussed food trucks, and I wanted to clarify a couple of things. My whole motivation of getting in this food truck business is to make Casper a better place to live. You can't really match the high that you see when you start out a business, and it transforms into people turning into customers and enjoying the food that you deliver. Last council meeting, I was kind of thrown back when it was brought to our attention that no one was in Sunrise Mall when I had 1,000 people out in the parking lot. Well, you're right. At 5 o'clock, 24 of the businesses out of 27 are closed. There's no reason for people to be in the mall. There's only 3 businesses open, and it's always been me and a fast food joint and now Harbor Freight. You have to admit that 1,000 people at this food truck rally brings a lot of exposure and marketing to those mall businesses. And we just decided to do that, not as a sharp stick in the eye to the city council, but to show that you can capitalize on people if we do something like this in downtown Casper. And, with the east side now starting to pump up with David Street Station, the west side's starting to really, suffer. And we got to look at both parties. And I think if a food truck rally or something on the east side or west side would help, the folks are willing to do it. I have a letter here from Sunrise Shopping Center Mall Management who supports us and loves the exposure that this food truck situation has brought to their mall. And they encourage families to come out and enjoy it. And they want long-lasting events happening out there for the summer at Sunrise Mall. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, and I want to appreciate the city council. I'm sad to hear that some of you are leaving, because you've been a big part of the city. I appreciate and I want to express my gratitude for everything you've done for the city, because I've watched it. And good luck to you, and I hope the best.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Vice Mayor.
Mr. Caputa, if we did designate a space in the downtown area for mobile vendors that could be accessed just using the annual permit and would not require a specific permit for that time of day or whenever, and the food truck could essentially utilize at their discretion, would you see yourself utilizing it?
Oh, heck yeah, a lot of us would. I mean, when we tabled the food truck ordinance this Memorial Day weekend, this last weekend, I mean, it was like eclipse all over. And one food truck down there. People were walking around without water and stuff. I mean, if you had an area that all of us can go, it'll take a lot of pressure off the restaurants that are open, because there were some that chose not to open. And I think we would definitely utilize that and have fun with it. I think the citizens of Casper want it. The majority of people want it. So I think that's a visionary way of looking at it and getting after something that all can benefit from.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Mr. Sean Houck, please come forward. You're good? Good. Miss Jackie Anderson, I don't see her. Okay. Discussion. Mr. Hopkins, sorry. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's some things that have come out over all the time we've been discussing this. First of all, what's going on in the mall on South Poplar, that is on private property. And whether that mall operator chose to let this happen, well, he apparently did choose to let it happen because it did. But I noted, interestingly, that the gentleman who spoke, his business was open, and he's a promoter of it, has a food truck and has a restaurant. And there was one other organization that was open that was in the food business. And it's extremely unfair to that person. But again, that's a problem between a landlord and their parking lot. The situation downtown is different. The situation downtown is we have a number of restaurants that have been downtown and are downtown 24/7, 365 days a year, plus or minus. Those businesses deserve a fair opportunity to do what they're doing. But when we have an ordinance such as this, which is so grossly unfair to the businesses that have been there for years downtown and the businesses that might want to open downtown, that becomes part and parcel of what we have a downtown for. A downtown has restaurants, it has stores, it has all kinds of things. But when we have an ordinance like this, which literally closes the two busiest blocks in our city. I mean, today, you were actually down there and it was gridlocked at 3:30 on 2nd Street and about David, or 2nd Street and Durbin. It was gridlocked. People couldn't get through the stoplights. So it's the two busiest streets in town, or two busiest blocks in town, and we're going to allow them to put food trucks and literally destroy the businesses that are in the business to sell food all year round, not just on the best days of the year. So for that reason, I'll be opposing this.
Thank you. Councilman Laird.
Well, it's interesting the opinions that we have here, because mine's a little different than Bob's. I don't even like this ordinance. I think we can handle it without an ordinance myself. I think the city management has the ability to handle everything I've heard here. And with reference to the thing at Sunrise, I've gone by it several times. It's a huge success. It's I'd like to see those people downtown. And the lady that's complained, I can understand her complaint, but I still think it's one of those things that, Edsel complained. Nobody bought their cars. They just didn't want to get them up to date. So there's more than one element to this, in my opinion. There's multiple elements, and
a huge element is that our public wants these food trucks. There was something going on down at the David Creek Station as I came down here. I didn't see any food trucks down there. I bet you they could be making money over there and have even more people there. And it's a new concept, and it's a concept that younger people understand, and that we all wonder why our younger people are leaving this town, and it's because older people are expressing their views and voting on ordinances that I think are antiquated, and that's why I said I think we need younger people on the city council. I don't know if any younger people are running or not, but it's just a change of guard, a change of ideas. So truly, I'm going to vote against the ordinance because I just think it's not useful. And we're passing some not useful ordinances, in my opinion, that are punitive in nature. And they're going to prove to be that way over time. And I don't think that our downtown, I think our downtown is going to suffer because we are not a little more enlightened and allow people to have their restaurant seating outside and have food trucks and to allow things to happen that are of the times. I'm not in keeping downtown in the way that it used to be handled in the 50s and 60s. So that's my opinion.
Councilman Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add a few comments. Having a vehicle of any sort occupying a parking space, I don't believe is going to cause any gridlock, nor would a sidewalk cafe for that matter, which hopefully we can address at future council meetings where we're going to possibly take away parking spaces during the summer months. So I'm happy to see this finally come into law, should have passed tonight, and then hopefully we can just see how it works, really.
Any other discussion? I think we, on the way down here coming to council, I drove by the plaza, and of course the farmer's market was starting, and there was kids everywhere in the splash pad. It was a thriving, exciting downtown, and I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think this is a good move for us, and I agree with Councilman Morgan that we're heading in that good direction, and I'm glad that we're passing this. We've got some great opportunities downtown, and if you don't believe me, you should go down there about in the evening time during that, and you'll see a thriving downtown. It's pretty awesome. We're pretty lucky. Amendments. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote. Oh, are you abstaining?
I am.
Yeah, okay. Please record the vote. I'm sorry, Krista.
You're fine. With council members Hopkins, Humphrey, and Johnson voting nay, and Councilman Laird voting abstaining, motion passes. Yes?
Please read the consent ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance amending section 1.28.010E of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to the penalty for a violation of Casper Municipal Code 5.08.370, minors' possession of alcohol or public intoxication.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the consent ordinance just read.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Councilman Huber. Council will now listen to a citizen that has asked to speak on this topic. Please remember, public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication. Mr. Keith Rowland, please come forward.
Keith Rowland, 542 South Durban. 3 points. The first one is I would like to see a change, which I'm sure I'm not going to get, and that is a mandatory counseling for those who violate minors in possession. Just giving them a fine or putting them in jail, it's just going to piss them off. It doesn't change anything. They're still going to be drinking in the future. I think these kids need counseling, but I doubt at this point in time that you're going to add that. However, I would like to have changes in the actual wording of this. If I can give that, is this possible to put it up on some screen?
No, Fleur is, but if you'll rotate it. Super.
I guess it's not up there. Okay. Is the top one is my suggestion, is the bottom one is the way it currently reads. The first change I would like to make is the and/or slash or. In contracts and law, I always thought it was the cardinal rule that this should be avoided at all costs. Do not put this in any ordinance, do not put it in your contracts. And if we look at the actual original minors and possessions, the penalty, 010, penalties for code violations. And here we talk about minors and possessions, 508370, is in the actual wording, in that particular wording, it says, any person convicted of such attempt is subject to a fine or jail or both. I think that we need to have the exact same wording, a fine or jail or both, and not have this and/or. I think we need to be consistent. It also avoids that and/or slash comment that has a lot of legal issues, as I understand from lawyers. I think that's one particular change. My second change is there is no word convicted anywhere in this particular wording that you have it now. And if you read, as I read before, if you read it says any person convicted of such attempt, we don't have the word convicted in there. We have it effectively, it's in there, formally charged by filing a complaint with the municipal court. That effectively is in there. But for for a person reading this, they don't understand that. Remember, this is not meant for just lawyers and judges, it's meant for that minor that might be using alcohol. You need to make it as simple as possible. Make it in there for violation of section blah, blah, blah. Upon conviction thereof, blah, blah, blah. Then there's a sentence, blah, blah, blah. Make it very simple. And also within, this is part E, the F and the F, let's see, F and G, they also use the word convicted, upon conviction, subsequent conviction, conviction, upon conviction thereof. All the wording within all those other ones within the same section, they use the word conviction. And I think we also need to do that. My third reason for coming here tonight is I was appalled listening to the tape by some of the members of this council when it talks about minors in possession. They sort of view it as like, oh, whatever, a very haphazard type of attitude. I think that is one of the reasons why we have a lot of problems in the city with either a very low graduation rate or we have battered spouse syndromes, all those things, homelessness. Not that everybody that drinks as a minor becomes homeless or batters wives or whatever, but I bet you every single one that does or is homeless, when they were minors, they drank. Also, that I read in the paper last week about that girl that was sexually assaulted, and she was drinking that night. Maybe if she wasn't drinking as a minor, she might have made better choices that evening. So I think the council really needs to take a step up as opposed to viewing this as like whatever type of thing. It's a serious problem in this community. Any questions?
Councilman Huber.
First of all, I just want to assure you, I don't think anyone on this council has a so-so attitude about this. If it came across that way, I think that was either inartful on the part of any members of the council with how they might have expressed things or a misinterpretation. But I think that the whole council takes this very, very seriously. I do want to comment about one thing that you suggested about the counseling. One of the things that all of the research, and Councilman Powell, I think, can back me up on this, all of the research with reference to ordering counseling in these kind of cases stands for the proposition that you don't just blanket order every offender into counseling. You get them evaluated and you make a decision and an informed decision based on an evaluation that this guy needs counseling, that one doesn't. And so while it might sound like a good idea to say that everybody gets counseling, that's actually very counterproductive. And all the research on the subject indicates.
I strongly disagree with you. I think the research will show that mandatory counseling does work. Okay, I'm just saying, when I learned from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, they were strongly on mandatory counseling before lowering the 18 age. The trouble is the judges do not have enough time to evaluate if the person needs or not. This way, upon mandatory counseling, you have that person has an hour or two of sitting down there and talking to them and deciding if they need continuous counseling. The judge, that 10 minutes in the courtroom or 5 minutes, cannot make a decision, in my opinion, if that person needs counseling or not. I disagree with you strongly. I'm sorry.
I think we perhaps might be agreeing more than you think. Evaluating is one thing. Ordering them into counseling is a different thing. And ordering them into counseling is what I'm saying is very counterproductive. Requiring them to go get an evaluation, that is a good idea. And I totally agree with you about that.
Well, that's what most of the time is counseling, is they have that you have to go see somebody for whatever, and then they decide, because they're a specialist on this, they decide if it needs another 20 hours, maybe 20 hours of this, or maybe an hour and a half was fine, the person, whatever, is explaining. I don't think a judge in that 5 minutes in the courtroom can make a rational decision.
It's not the judge. The judge doesn't do the evaluation. He orders an evaluation, and then they get what's called an ASI done, Addiction Severity Index, by a counselor, and then that report is given back to the court.
And is it mandatory that they get the evaluation?
If that's what the judge decides.
And that's what I'm saying. He decides that. That's why I want it in the ordinance that it must be done. I don't want to have the leeway. If the judges that are currently serving in this community have failed, we have a terrible minor imposition thing. We have a terrible graduation rate here, and that I think a lot of it is because of the fact that, one, the attitude of the community, and two, is because the judges are not doing their job of making sure these kids don't drink.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. Discussion. Councilman Laird.
The thing that I don't like about this ordinance is it gives these kids a record that they're stuck with. And what I found about probation and these ASIs, once again, I can't emphasize more, this is a status offense. It doesn't require any level to be proven. And so then they're ordered to an ASI and they're taken up there and asked if they're doing drugs and everything else. And I think their rights are being overhauled. So they're getting more information out of them than without them having a lawyer. And I think there's problems with that. And it's been used and done because they're children and they can't afford lawyers. And so now I don't know what's going to happen if they start demanding lawyers and we have to start paying for them. But the offense that they're being charged with is really just a nothing offense. It means you can just be sitting by a bottle of beer. The next thing, you're having to go to counseling, pay for that, have a record, and we were laughing today about this one guy said, this guy that works at First Interstate Bank, that a lot of you probably know, he says, yeah, I remember when they picked me up and they made me pour out $50 worth of beer out on the gutter. He says, it was $50 worth of beer. And that's the one thing he remembers from his childhood. And I remember when they took beer out of my car and called my parents. And there's that kind of treatment can work on children. Might not work on some other ones. But this is a harsh punishment, and for different reasons than what Keith said, I don't think it's going to work at all. Because there's just no real element to it of a length of counseling, which they may need if they have an alcohol problem. But then it leaves them with a record that they can't get rid of, and they're children. That's the part I don't like about it.
Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's true, it will leave them with a record, but they would have received a record even under the old standard, whether or not there was any aspect of jail time associated with it. I think we all understand that jail time is associated with it to address exactly what Mr. Rowland was talking about and also what Judge Huber was talking about, because with that allows the probation time where after a professionally done assessment says that if this young person has an alcohol problem, that they go through treatment. Without it, there's nothing more than a fine. And so you just rack up fine after fine after fine. Maybe they're paid, maybe they're not. This is a proactive measure. I absolutely think it will do some good. It will You see, you can't really arrest your way out of a problem. You certainly arrest the problem, and then you grant avenues to where a person can not continue down that same path. And so this isn't just an incarceration issue. This is an option where they can receive counseling when they need it. And the judge was touching on it. As far as everyone receiving counseling, there's different levels. And so if it's a person that doesn't need it because they don't have an addiction or a propensity towards it, then there's different options for the judges to follow. But if we don't pass this, if we continue the rite of passage mentality, then we do nothing to improve our community. And there's absolutely no one that can say, you know, I've made better choices when I was drinking than when I wasn't drinking. And then if we can sideline an 18, 19-year-old kid from going down a life of alcoholism, we've improved the outlook of our community. So to not pass this is irresponsible in my mind.
Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, can we put this gentleman's suggested languages back up on the screen? I think that he might be onto something under his suggestion here for a violation of this and upon conviction thereof. I think that language is more clear and more elegant than the language in the lower as it exists. And so I would offer, and I would move to amend that subpart E to so it would read as this gentleman suggested: for a violation of that section and upon conviction thereof, the court may impose a penalty up to the $750 fine. Really what I'm wanting to amend is the first couple lines of that. As far as the issue of saying a $750 fine or incarceration or both versus the and or as we had it in the existing proposed amendment, proposed ordinance. And I consulted with Mr. Henley before our meeting to see if his legal judgment was that or both versus and or made any legal difference. I don't think it does. I think they both accomplish the same thing. But I would move to amend the first for a violation of this and upon conviction thereof. That is more clear and elegant language than I think than what we have down below there. Committed and formally charged. His suggested language, I think, is clearer, is better language.
So after our discussion, Councilman Huber, I'll call for an amendment,
Okay.
and I'll have you do it at that time. Councilman Johnson.
I again just want to point out that at the age of 18, you're allowed to star in porno films, buy cigarettes, enter into a binding contract, but you can't possess alcohol. It's the only adult thing that you can't do as an adult in the United States, and I think it's ridiculous. I am not in favor of punishing adults for doing adult things. 1.5% of all MIP arrests in the entire state of Wyoming in 2012 were under the age of 18. 1.5%. Everybody else was between the ages of 18 and 20. And this idea that just because you have a beer when you're underage, you're automatically going to turn into this homeless drunk guy wandering the streets is ridiculous. How many of us up here have drank alcohol before they were 21 years old? None of us
Both my hands.
None of us are destitute because we did that. I mean, I just find it ridiculous. Now, I know, it's a federal thing, and but to me, change starts at the local level. I'm going to vote no on the ordinance just because I don't agree with punishing adults for doing adult things.
Mr. Mayor.
Hold on, I got Councilman Powell, then I'll get you. Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Your Honor. I am going to vote for this, and at the risk of repeating myself, I agree with everything Councilman Johnson has said about the 18 to 21-year-olds, and yet the judges are judges because they have a responsibility to look at the information before them and make these judgment calls. The more restrictions we place on them or limitations, the less flexible that they can be. And despite our efforts to make it clear that we have no interest in jailing adolescents, it continues to be reported as we want to put kids in jail, which is absolutely not the case. And people will say, well, why don't you just have them do community service? Well, when kids are ordered to community service, I'll tell you which kids go. The kids go that basically have good parents, that have been in very little trouble, and they're scared because all of a sudden there's a spotlight on them. And so they say, I better go do my community service. There's another population of kids who have learned that the best tactic when they are in trouble for them is to do nothing and see if anything really happens. And what they find out is nothing really happens. And so that's a smaller population of kids. But those are the kids we're concerned about, because they started using not when they were 16 or 17, they started using when they were 10 or 11. And they're down that road pretty far. And when they come before the court, there's an opportunity for us not to punish them. This isn't about punishing them, but to give them an opportunity for us to be adults and say, this is not good, what's happened to you. And there's usually an abuse history, and that's a sad thing. But we as the responsible adults have an opportunity when they come before court to say, it's time for you to change your direction, because they're not capable of doing that on their own. And so it is the threat of consequences that requires them to complete the evaluation. Because the judge can order the evaluation, but you better know what you're going to do if the kid doesn't go to the evaluation, which happens. And if you don't have some consequences in place for that, then that really is the young person's best tactic, is to simply ignore everything they've been ordered to do. And so I just trust our judges to make these calls, and the process that Councilman Johnson describes is correct. The other acronym we deal with is the American Society for Addictions Medicine, which has created a system for categorizing the seriousness of a substance abuse problem and tailoring treatment to the level of severity. And so in that system, we have level 1, level 2, actually have level 0.5, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And it is the evaluation that comes back to the judge saying, this problem is a 0.5 problem, and this kid just needs to go through an education program. This kid, however, needs residential treatment based on what we know. And without that system in place, without that evaluation being done, and the judge having the authority to say, here are your choices, young person. The evaluation says you need to be in residential treatment, and if you don't comply with that, we're going to put you in jail. Well, that's what gets the kid into residential treatment that he needs. And it's for him. It's not so we can punish him. It's for that young person to give them a chance to do this course correction that I've described before. So all too often this is described as a way to punish people, and that is not the case. What we're interested in is giving them the help that they need at a critical juncture of their life. And so, and this is about giving the judge a tool that was no longer available based on that Supreme Court's decision, which I think was well, it's not my place to say whether it was correct or not. It simply was. And so now we have a situation where the judges can take that young person that's been on this road for some time and say, we now have the authority to tell you that this is what you're going to do. And I guarantee you the vast majority of them, after that experience, if they can achieve full sobriety, will, after a period of time, say, thank you. Thank you for doing something that made me make the changes that I needed to make. So that's my speech. I will be voting for it.
Councilman Laird.
I want to point this out. I debated on whether I should point this out, but I'm going to. Because the statute's inconsistent, Mr. City Attorney. If you leave E the way it is, which is may impose a penalty of up to $700 or incarceration for a period not to exceed 6 months or both, that's going to mean you either do the fine or you do the incarceration. I've been to the Supreme Court on this before too for the sheriff of Natrona County 25 years ago. So that's a mistake, needs to be changed. The language down in E of and or should be in well, they're both E. The one that says $50 or incarceration should be and or. Preferably, I'd like to say either or, where you can either fine them because the judge feels that they shouldn't have jail, as Charlie says, so just fine them. Or you give them the probation and you do all of that. Now, the thing that Charlie says that never has seemed to come up in here is who pays for all this? Who pays for this ASI, Charlie? Because they send them to where you work. I mean, your firm makes money on this deal. Now that's something else again. When you bring up what you're going to do with this ordinance about people that have conflicts of interest.
Clarification, my practice does not do those evaluations.
But the firm does.
No.
ASIs.
No.
There's no ASIs done up there?
That's correct.
All right. But they do if they're sentenced to, if they have to go see a counselor, then they're seen by people at CWCC.
I don't work at CWCC.
Where do you work?
I'm in private practice and have
Okay.
been for almost 4 years.
All right, thank you. So who pays for it? And then what happens when this kid doesn't have any money? Who pays for this? So I can tell you right now, if they do an ASI, that's somewhere between $75 and $150. If they're sent to a live at 25, they got to go to a highway patrol thing, and I think that's my remembrance of it was $35 to $50. And then if they have to go see a counselor, what do they typically charge per hour, Charlie?
Your Honor.
$100?
My former employer, Central Wyoming Counseling Center, charges all of their fees on a sliding fee scale based on income. And so those evaluations are relatively inexpensive, as is the counseling. It is not zero, but I can tell you it's less than that that maximum fine amount.
So I know the one I had that I took to the Supreme Court, it was about $800. Now, here's another thing that happens, Councilman, is there was a woman in our court, and she had done everything, and she'd gone to your former employer, and she ran out of money, and she passed everything, and she was in there being sentenced, and so she needed to produce the report from the psychological center. The judge says, you're going to jail if you don't produce the report. She had no money. So Zach Zucchelli, who now works for the city and was our prosecutor, was defending her case. And he did a fine job of defending her case. And he pointed out to the court, she doesn't have the money, but she's passed everything. But CWCC wouldn't give the report that the judge needed to see to prove this. And she was in a great, great bind. And what happened, I don't know the final issue of what happened because I was in there that day with this other case, but Zach ordered, well, give us some time to produce that report. So if she's up there and she's done all of this work, now she's got to pay CWCC, who Charlie used to work for, or she doesn't get the report so that she doesn't have to go do 5 days in jail. Now this does this to people. The other thing that it does, if you put a clause in here as an amendment that says when they're 21, this record is wiped out, I might be a little happier with it. But when some kid does something 16 or 17 and it follows him forever, because he went out and had a couple beers or is at a party and he drank a half a beer or he had a beer in his hand, because he's guilty of this charge, this misdemeanor, if he just has the beer in his hand and hasn't drank any of it. And so this is harsh on our children. And, Councilman Walsh comes up with these terribly tragic deals, but most people don't end up in these terrible tragic deals. A lot of people, like everybody here, and I'd say if they answered your question, everybody here has probably had a beer or something when they were a kid. And in my case, I did, and the police then didn't do much. They embarrassed you, took the beer, and called your parents. We don't do that anymore. But everybody grew up that I know to be pretty good people. They didn't all grow up to be staggering drunks and have all these problems that everybody keeps talking about here. It's a punitive mentality, and it makes me sick to hear it about our children in this town to be stuck with this for the rest of their life. It should just say, wipe this record out when you're 21. Take your clean slate and go into the Army and do whatever you want to do. But this is just, I just think as it sets now, leave it that way, because I think when they get in there, they're going to pay the penalty or they're going to have to do probation. But I think that does need to be amended if you really want this ordinance. But to say in a status offense, if you just walk by the beer, you can be arrested. It's ridiculous. Then to have to go pay for an ASI, go to counseling, do all this stuff to see if you're drinking or on drugs. I just think it's too harsh.
Other discussion? Councilman Johnson.
I want to point out one incident. There was an incident in New Jersey here recently. It's in the national media. A 20-year-old woman who was sitting next to an unopened beer can, and it blew up into this big thing that spread, that is now in national news. I'm not going to comment on the use of force or anything like that. I wasn't there. But she was 20 years old, an adult, had a child, was sitting on the beach next to an unopened beer can. She's an adult in every other sense of the word. And then this incident blew. It didn't even have to be an incident. Didn't even have to be an incident. She was an adult.
Councilman Hubert.
Mr. Mayor, I happen to agree with Councilman Johnson about the drinking age. The problem is that our United States Congress crammed that down our throats, and they have not changed it over all the years since they did. Frankly, I have to say that I was rather proud of Governor Hirschler in the state of Wyoming when they resisted that as long as they did. But that is something that we don't have a choice in dealing with. What we do have a choice in dealing with is trying to have an ordinance that will enable our municipal court to try to handle these cases in a manner so that they will be in the best interest of the young people that come into court. And I would trust that our municipal judges will sit there and realize that it's different if you're 15 or 16 versus if you're 20 years old and a week before your birthday or something. But I just felt compelled to point that out on the record here.
My only comment that I'll make in my 20-plus years of working with young people, both kids coming out of residential treatment, doing ASIs, working with that, is I support this ordinance. And I agree with Councilman Walsh and our Vice Mayor and with Councilman Huber. This gives more tools for our judges to be able to do that. And the job is that we just don't throw them in the jail cell and say good luck and then whatever else happens. But Councilman Powell is very correct on the scale of what we look at when we try to see if a student or a child needs help and what that level looks like. And I hope that our municipal judges would be able to see that. And I think this is an ordinance that will work, and I think that we won't see any issues with that. And so I do agree adamantly with both what the other council members had mentioned about it. Amendments.
Mr. Mayor, I would offer the amendment, and I think I can say it a little bit more clearly now than I did earlier. This gentleman's proposed language here, for a violation of section 5.08.370 of this code and upon conviction thereof, and comma, I would move that we use his language rather than the 3 lines in the current proposed ordinance up to the comma there where it says municipal court for the city, comma. Just substitute in his first two lines to that comma for the 3 lines that are on there. Am I saying that clearly enough?
That makes sense, John. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, excuse me, discussion. I apologize. Thanks, John. Discussion. Please cast your vote. Oh, sorry.
Aye.
Do it the old way.
You raise our hands.
Fails because there's nobody voted.
I don't think so.
No, I pushed it.
Please record the vote.
With Councilmember Johnson and Mayor Pacheco voting nay, motion to amend passes.
Thank you. Now on to cast the vote for the third reading on the ordinance. Please cast your vote.
As amended.
As amended, thank you. Please record the vote.
With Councilmembers Johnson and Laird voting nay, motion passes.
Somebody should have amended that or language, that's going to be in court.
Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 11A1, a resolution authorizing a contract with the Casper Firefighters Local Union 904 for the contract period July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2020. Item 11A2, a resolution authorizing a contract between the Casper Area Metropolitan Planning Organization and Nelson Nygaard Consulting Associates, Inc. for a Casper Area Long-Range Transportation Plan. Item 11A3, a resolution authorizing an amendment to the Wyoming Smart Capital Network Agreement between the City of Casper and the participating Wyoming municipalities in the state consortium for the purpose of stimulating economic development efforts. Item 11A4, a resolution establishing fees for the Metropolitan Animal Control Facility and rescinding resolution number 13236. Item 11A5, a resolution authorizing an amendment to the lease agreement with the State of Wyoming Department of Administration and Information Construction Management for property located in the downtown area. Item 11A6, a resolution authorizing a procurement agreement with Q's Inc. for the solid waste CCTV push camera system. Item 11A7, a resolution authorizing a contract for professional services with Mountain West Telephone for the installation of fiber communication for the new Casper Fire Station number 5. Item 11A8, a resolution authorizing a general service contract with Rocky Mountain Power for the Baylor Building MRF expansion electrical services upgrades. Item 11A9, a resolution authorizing an underground right-of-way easement with Rocky Mountain Power for the Baylor Building MRF expansion electrical service upgrades. Item 11A10, a resolution authorizing a contract for outside city water service with the Church of the Holy Family. Item 11A11, a resolution authorizing a contract with High Tech Communications, Inc. for installation and configuration of video surveillance cameras. Item 11A12, a resolution adopting the City of Casper Americans with Disabilities Act grievance policy in compliance with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Item 11A13, a resolution authorizing the release of local assessment district liens.
Thank you, Krista. The chair to entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Walsh. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Please read the consent minute action titles.
Item 12A1, authorizing the discharge of uncollectible accounts receivable balances aged between the date of January 1st, 2013 and March 31st, 2013. Item 12A2, authorizing the purchase of 3 new mid-size police utility vehicles from Fremont Motor Company, Lander, Wyoming, for use by the Casper Police Department. Item 12A3, rejecting the bid from Western States Fire Protection for the Life Steps Campus Building F fire suppression and campus fire alarm system replacement project. And item 12A4, authorizing the inclusion of fiscal year 2018-2019 summary proposed budget into the minutes of the June 5th, 2018 regular council meeting.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Walsh.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Morgan. Abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Now is the time that we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with the council to come forward. As stated in the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please state your name and address. Direct all questions, comments to the mayor and only the mayor. No personal attacks on our staff or the council will be tolerated, and council will not respond to any personnel matters. Those will be referred to the city manager. Questions posed to the speaker by the speakers may or may not be responded to by council members, and presentations will be limited to only 5 minutes, and the duplication of speakers will not be allowed, nor time extensions will be permitted.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
My name is Andrea Whistler. I live at 403 South Durbin, number 109. And I haven't seen you guys for quite a while. I escaped the mental facility called Shepherd of the Valley Healthcare Facility, and I'm out on my own again. I'm down here for a couple of reasons. I don't know if you guys realize it or not, but the cutouts that you guys have on the sidewalks, I know that y'all wanted beautification of downtown Casper and everything else like that. And don't get me wrong, it looks pretty nice. But do you realize how scary and dangerous those cutouts are if you're in a chair or on crutches or with a walker? They're very steep and they're very, very dangerous. They're way at an incline like this, and if you're going down them, they catch the pedal and they about throw you out. I'm big enough, I'd make a big grease stain in the middle of the road. But you got little people who, I mean, they have no chance.
Andrew, you're saying this is downtown?
This is in the downtown area, and it's also throughout Casper.
Okay.
And there's times when I have to go out from one of them. I can't take it. I can't go up one or I can't come down one because they are too steep. This has been a problem that I've discussed with other people who are in chairs in similar situations. Also, the sidewalks that Casper has, some of them are really in bad condition. And you guys think it's bad on the roads? You ought to be in one of these things and hit a bump. We don't have the shock system you guys do. You know, they're really bad. And I'm just asking for you, if you want to see how it is, get into one of these chairs and take a ride for yourself. I'll take you down on a tour and see if you guys can handle going on it and see if it doesn't scare you. Another situation that we're having, and I'm begging somebody, I don't know how we get to do this, but we've got some kind of little game going on with who can scare the people in the chairs the best. And we got pickups and cars that like to come right up on our backs. And they get right close up to us and they either gun their engines or they honk right at us. And it's very scary. So scary that the one time the guy got too close and he clipped my back wheel. Now, I do wear my safety belt. Now, thank God at that time, I am fat because I stayed in my chair. Had I been little, I'd have been gone. I'd have been gone out of my chair. It would not have been a pretty sight. But that's what would have happened. I've been spun. I've been high-centered. It's a game and it's not always just teenagers doing it. It's older people too. They think it's funny. I've seen it happen to many other handicapped people. And I'm just bringing it to your attention because those things aren't funny for the city of Casper. You know, this is my home too. And I'm proud of it. And now I get to come down and I get to go down to the city of Casper and go around and see it I take friends down there. We walk down there. Well, they walk. I move. And, you know, this is something that if something happens to me while they're with me, it's going to freak them out more than anything. And I do have seizure activity, and I don't want them to have to see me have a seizure if I hit the ground and get hurt. I'm begging you, please check those cutouts because they are steep. They are dangerous. Some of the sidewalks have lips on them at least this big, and you don't see them until you bop them down. And then I also wanted to point out, just at the last of this, you guys missed something with.
You have 30 seconds, Andrea.
Yeah, you guys missed something on that last thing. When he was talking about the drinking of the underage, he said that the female may not have had the sexual problem if she had not been drinking. Please check that out next time. You guys, not everything is because of drinking. You know.
Oh, I caught that, and I was going to make a comment at the end here.
Well, I did too, and I just.
Fairly offended by that comment.
Yes, I was, and I just caught it too. So I just thought I'd better bring it up.
Thank you, Andrea. We'll look into those cutouts, and then you have my number, right? Yes, so you can contact me.
Yes.
And give me a call, and then give me a couple days, and I'll talk to our city manager, and I'll do a follow-up on those cutouts, and then also the other things that you were talking about, okay? So give me a call.
I'll gladly take you on a tour. So.
Yeah, give me a call, okay? All right, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, oh, hold on, Andrea.
Mr. Henley, is that a moving violation if someone endangers someone in a wheelchair when they're driving their vehicle, do you know?
Can't hear you, John.
But it would have to be observed by a police officer, I assume.
No.
Not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of proof on, how far they'll push it with just, two people saying this.
You had a license number and you called police.
You had a couple of witnesses. Sure.
I sure hope so.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ma'am, that's approximately what I was about to say. I know that when one of these upsetting, threatening kind of incidents happens, it's really difficult to, oh, well, okay, yeah, let's see now, that was a red 1993 Chevrolet, blah, 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 with this license plate number. But without that kind of, without something that you can report to the police, there's really very little that the city or any other enforcement entity can do to protect that. What I would really, truly suggest, whenever you have one of these things happen, call the police, make a report to the police department about it. If someone's with you, or if you see somebody else on the sidewalk, ask them, hey, did you see what happened? Did you happen to get any other information? Because without that information, there's really nothing that the police can do. I can think of several potential violations that would be involved there, and so I think there are some things. But I would really, and believe me, and I agree with you. Until you have your mobility challenged, you don't know what that means. I never knew what it meant until just a few years ago. But there are some things. But unfortunately, without being able to tell the cops, okay, this is the license plate number, this is a description of the vehicle, things like that, there's really very little that can be done.
I can get the make and the model usually, but I can't get the license plate. I'm not fast enough for that. I tried.
Yeah, so. Believe me, I'm not naive. I'm not sitting here saying, well, geez, lady, you didn't get the, I know how that is.
And surprisingly, everybody from down at the corners, they can get the make and model of the vehicle, but they always forget the license plate. So.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention and awareness too, okay? Great. Thanks, Andrea.
One of the things they can do, Mr. Mayor, is get one of those GoPros and video.
Yeah, carry it with them. Yeah.
That's what it takes.
Anybody else? Hi, Mr. Steensland.
Dennis Stainsland, 533 South Washington. Those of us that have our health don't have many problems when it comes to this stuff here. I guess what I'm talking about tonight, 6 months we spent on this, vendors. And I read here that the cost for an annual fee is $75. That's not even one evening's take. So I think you made a mistake there. I think that could have been easily $250. I'm with Bob Hopkins on the David to Durban. I don't think that should ever be opened up for any kind of trucks. So 6 months later, and you haven't changed my mind one bit, and I don't think it's a whole lot different than what it was originally proposed. Okay, the next issue tonight was the drinking thing. I'm with all those that think that everything was too stiff. 6 months, $750 fine. It's just too drastic for something. And 16, 17, I left home with good graces at 16. So there's a lot of people that are grown up at 16. I'm with Sean on the age bracket thing. So anyway, I just think that one was overboard. I hope it works for everybody, but I don't like to see anything stick with them. I did have a record when I was young. I tried to get a copy of it recently after discussion down here. It was erased. I had no record. So anyway, they do erase the records, and this was when I was 20. So anyway, that's my concerns tonight, and that's it.
Didn't see your name on any of the,
No, you did not.
for city council, Mr. Steensland. I thought for sure I was going to see it this time.
2 years of coming to this, I've learned enough not to get involved. I've said that ever since I started getting involved in this.
You're much smarter than probably a lot of us up here.
No, it's still interesting, and I don't envy any of your job. But anyway, it was interesting that only 3 seats were interested in, people were interested in, when we had 12 people, when Mr. Huber got the nod. So I don't know what's
small
going on,
turnout,
but
yeah.
there's something going on that's not good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, thank you much.
Well, we appreciate you coming up.
Oh, I kind of doubt it sometimes.
Thanks, Mr. Steensland. Anybody else?
Keith Ron, 542 South Durban. A couple quick points. Mr. Johnson, your example is probably pretty bad. There's drinking on the beach. It's a state park in New Jersey. You can't drink on the beach, so it makes no difference if the person was 20 or 30. There were 2 violations there, minor possession, also drinking on the beach. The budget is coming up for approval in a few weeks. I wish we would have what we call as a redlined edition, where you redline the things that you changed, and then if you added something, you put it in blue. So when you read this over, not only the council members, but the public can say, oh, we changed this, and we added this, and whatever. Otherwise, we have the budget, and then we have the one that we're going to approve, and like, all right, what did we change? I read legal documents very frequently. Many times they're 1,500 pages long for reorganization plans for bankruptcy companies. And when they file amended reorganization plan, they always do a redlined edition. They also print out one that's complete. But the redlined one is the one you read because then you see, oh, this changed over here and there. And I think it's a lot easier for us, for the public, and for you guys to see. My last point is what she mentioned. This city is the worst, except for maybe downtown Fort Lauderdale, I've ever lived in or been in the world for driving. Either as a pedestrian or as a bicyclist. I've gotten hit once going across CY Avenue on Poplar. They actually hit me. And another person screamed out, you need to watch where you're going. I told the city a few times that light needs to be changed from a yellow blinking to a red when there's a walk sign there, when it says walk, because you're going across, it's very long, and so you're in the middle, and all of a sudden the cars flip around on CY and go north on Poplar Street. And if you're in the middle, there are 2 car lanes coming, so it's impossible for them to really adjust because there's 2 cars coming together. They can't sort of really swing because they'll swing right into the other car. That sign, and I've asked many times downtown to have that changed to red from yellow, and they just ignored me. Also, we had a walkability study done about 12 years ago and people came and mentioned different intersections. Not one thing has changed at any of those intersections to make it more walkable. Also, for riding my bicycle, I violate the law, and I'll be the first to admit it. I ride now on the sidewalk. I have gotten hit a few times. Sometimes I carry like a drink or something in a plastic bag. They have hit that bag on multiple occasions, and when they go by it, they laugh. Many states you have a 4-foot rule, that you have to give the person 4 feet. Here they give you nothing. And then they scream, get off the road, get off this. I'm not really supposed to be on the sidewalk, but I'm now riding on the sidewalk. The people don't, and the problem again on East 2nd Street where the walkway was put back to where it originally was. But the trouble is that hook curve was taken out of there. So you're down in the middle of the street, 35 feet down when it goes across. Two things. It's dangerous in there because you're in the middle of the street. And second of all, the cars are all in the middle of the crosswalk. So you can't go across there anyhow. I've talked to them about a month ago about this, and nothing is done. This is the worst city. That's why people do not walk around this city, and they don't ride their bicycles, because it happens to you a few times. You're like, whoa, let me go back into the car. It's terrible. And people we do nothing. We had a walkability study where people pointed out the problems, and they paid $55,000 for a study, and nothing happens.
Anybody else? At this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest. Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a reminder that the CNFR Mixer Appreciation Gathering tomorrow night at Fremont Motors, starting at 6 p.m. You're all more than welcome to attend that. It's set up for appreciation of the city council and the sponsors and that kind of thing. And then Thursday the 14th for CNFR will be the recognition of the city council and the county commission. The order of events is going around the table somewhere if you're curious about other details that are coming up. And I would just like to verify both the vice mayor and Councilman Laird brought up at the pre-session concerns about the money that's been accumulating for the expenses, the legacy fund. Instead of just talking about that, can we formally request as a body that we find out all the details on that situation?
Yeah, I think we can make that formal request.
And I think it was implied, but oftentimes those are overlooked. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Is everybody okay with that? John, you got that part. Thank you so much. Councilman Huber.
Nothing.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple things. First of all, I'd like to thank city staff for working with the state of Wyoming to get another lease for a while on the Goodstein property. That will be central to making downtown much better. And hopefully someday we'll get a long-term ownership arrangement on that piece of property, but we'll see how that goes. The other thing I wanted to do, I know we had a lot of people file fairly late in the program, like June 1st, to get on city council. And I know in the past we've had some people that got on city council and they were surprised at what transpired. And so I would just encourage anybody out there who is running for city council to give one of us a call, and we'd be glad to tell you a little bit about what goes on. Now, granted, it might be one person's opinion, but when it comes to what you need to do, what meetings you want to do, what committees you want to be on, I think all of us would be glad to discuss that with anybody that is running for council. And believe me, some of that kind of stuff is extremely helpful for the first night you sit down up in this chair. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilman Johnson.
My school dates have changed to August, so I'll be here this month, and I'll be gone all of August, or most of August anyway. And then I just want to, just to your point, Councilman Huber, about the drinking age, I understand that the Congress did what they did, and I understand that, in my opinion, the states were coerced. And I understand that the Casper City Council isn't going to do much on that front, but it is the responsibility of the states to push back when the 10th Amendment has been violated and is continuously violated by the federal government. It's our responsibility to push back. That case was only challenged one time in 1987 by South Dakota. nothing since then, so we just roll over on our backs and take what the federal government throws at us, I guess. So that was my whole point in bringing up the drinking age and all that. I understand that if we even change our ordinance to making it 21 and older, you're still going to get charged as an 18-year-old because the state statute is there that says that governs the drinking age. So it's just, I guess, a protest vote mostly from me. My way of pushing back at the man, I guess. That's all I got.
Thanks, Councilman. Councilman Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have too much, just to speak on some of the topics that were brought up by public comment. You know, I would have to agree this is probably one of the worst places that I've been in to walk in and around town. I've brought it up a couple of times. I think it'd be worth, even before, at the beginning of school year, just really harp on those crosswalks. You know, even on my ride along on 13th and Ash, there's a car wreck right there. I guess that happens frequently. Luckily, the person was parked on the parkway that lives there, because otherwise their vehicle would have been hit. But anyways, they were speaking about some of the kids, and there's accidents always there, and they're surprised that kids aren't even hit because so many people don't yield to pedestrians. Even our walk downtown, you know, my family and I were walking downtown, and a guy just completely oblivious to us in the middle of the street. So it's unbelievable. So hopefully we can get our police department staff to levels that we can tackle some of these problems and bad behaviors that some drivers do express towards pedestrians and cyclists. But we're not there yet. In terms of the line item budget, you know, I would say just going back to previous years, you have the staffing levels, you also have the budget amounts, and you can see an increase and decrease in both staffing levels and the expected expenditure. So right there, I mean, that should be your red and blue line of what we're changing or what is going to be changed. Should be a good indication right there. Outside of that, I'm pleased to see that people actually did throw their name in the hat. I was worried there for a little bit. You're going to have an appointment going on because nobody signed up. So
We're just too good, Jesse.
I've already had coffee with one of the contestants, and I'm excited, and hopefully I can just hand it over and let them know what it is like to be a city councilman. You know, we had a lot of changes just in the last 2 years here, and having, you know, not all the guidance that you would expect during those changes. You know, there's some stumbling blocks there. So hopefully we can change that with a new council handbook we could perhaps work on, and other measures. That's all I have.
Thanks, Councilman. Councilman Humphrey.
A quick question. During budget meetings, when you guys talked about step increases, was that to go into effect in 2020?
Tom, do you know if that was in effect 2020 or when that goes into effect?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Humphrey, it is my understanding that the step increases are not in play, that there was discussion about instituting a merit pay increase and that those funds would be used for that. And I do know that that is in the works and discussion is taking place internally. And I believe that City Manager Napier intends to bring something forward to council in the near future as how that program would work.
I just, again, want to make the pitch for the employees. I think we need to take care of them, and I don't know how, waiting until 2020 doesn't work for me, so that's all.
Thank you. Councilman Laird.
With respect to the issue of the city's money losses, and I'm hoping that the staff will investigate how we receive cash. I've gone to some of our facilities and watched the cash transactions, and they're antiquated compared to what I see some of my clients, how they watch money in their private businesses. And so we need to upgrade how we do that. especially in light of these revelations about what's happening at the event center in Hogadon. I thought I saw, Tom, in the budget, something about $835,000 as a subsidy for Hogadon. When I came on the council, everybody was talking about 500,000, and I remember the discussion. I said, I think it's going to end up being more closer to $1 million. Am I right on that number?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Laird, those amounts don't sound correct for Hogadon.
Okay.
That's quite a bit more than what's anticipated to be provided for them.
Oh, good. I'm glad you. I'd like to know the exact amount that we're looking at, but I thought I saw something in one of those documents we had. There were a couple different figures there. But my understanding of this legacy money situation is that that's something that occurred over the past 5 or 6 years. Am I correct on that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Laird, that is correct, we believe. As a matter of fact, we are going through the process right now of analyzing by year what happened. And typically during the budget process, there's an amount that's budgeted to be transferred in to make the budget whole at the end. And during the course of the year, things change. The revenues don't come in quite as we expect, or the expenses are a little higher. And over a period of time, that amount can grow. And I believe in this case, that is what happened. But we are in the process of providing more detail, and we'll be coming forward with a more formal presentation as to far as what happened and how it transpired.
And none of that occurred during the time that Mr. Napier has been the city manager.
No, we expect that this probably occurred over the last several years. As you mentioned, it's just a accumulation over a number of years that this amount has grown. And it's really not uncommon in some funds that the amount will go into deficit during a certain year with the hope that next year the performance will improve and that the chance that it can recover. But at some point there has to be a period of truing it up. And basically that's what this is looking at and say, okay, there's no longer probably a realistic chance that this particular fund will be able to recover that amount of money. So it's incumbent upon us to true that up, to get it a clean slate and move forward.
Then my understanding is that our auditors knew about it for all those years, but it just was never revealed for some reason to the city council. Am I right on that?
The auditors will be aware of it. What happens in the audit process, a number of funds are rolled up, if you will, into a more consolidated manner. So instead of reporting the financial statements on 50 different funds, they'll consolidate them into different groups. And as long as the group that is consolidated and has sufficient funding and resources, that'll just be accounted for in that manner, so it doesn't appear as an individual deficit. It's just a reduction in another fund's cash, and technically shows up as due from other funds on the financial statements. So it would likely not be a reportable offense as far as an audit is concerned, as long as there are sufficient funds within that grouping to cover it.
My understanding was the auditors knew about it.
They would. I mean, they go through the funds.
But the council didn't know about it. And at this point, you don't really know exactly what happened. Am I right on all of those?
We have an idea, but we want to take some time and go through it much more thoroughly and to be able to present to you folks exactly what we find and over what period of time and give you a little more details how it happened.
Because I, for one, want a total transparency on there. I can only speak for myself. I can't imagine anyone on the council not wanting total transparency and to tell us who is responsible, or all of the people responsible for that matter. I know sometimes people want to be totally politically correct, but I think we need to know what happened to our money and who was there when this was happening to our money and how this is going to affect us, because it's a big deal. So my other point, Mr. Mayor, is I would be in favor of closing the event center for 1 year to press the reset button up there, because we lost 300,000 or 400,000 more than we anticipated with the new company, and we get an explanation that some guy that was up there working didn't keep very good books, and nobody can tell me what happened to that money. Now, when I go talk to CPAs that I know, they say 300,000 or 400,000 isn't bad bookkeeping. That's nonsense. Something happened to that money. And there isn't a person on this council that can tell me what did happen to that money. I don't know what happened to the money. I get all these conversations from people. They bring down a little one-sheet piece of paper and try to explain it to me, but I never see any backup information. And so I think this is a matter that we have to absolutely stay on top of and not take the position, well, let's just go on forward. This is something that happened 5 or 6 years ago. I think we need to know what happened. That's my personal opinion. With regard to the food trucks, I like what Charlie did, inviting them to, on some lot that we have. I never got that straight where that's going to be, because I think that should be done, and it should be set forth somehow in writing. And Mr. Houck, the reason I voted against that ordinance, I don't like that ordinance. I think you ought to be able to park a food truck out there in front of your business at certain hours anytime you want. But I think that the ordinance probably is better for you than where we may have gone. And I wasn't sure where that was going to be, but I know the council spent a lot of time on that, has been pointed out by Dennis Steensland, but some of these things do take time. And they're very important to people. But I'm not a guy that, one size fits all either. Things change in this city, and I want this city to be known as a friendly city, not a punitive city. A city where we try to accommodate people, just like private business owners do. Accommodate the customer. Accommodate our citizens. Go listen to what Andrea Whistler was saying about these cutouts, because I've thought they're a little stiff myself just walking on them. But if they're made to spec and they've passed the city inspections reasonably, then I have to wonder about that too, because I've seen this same sort of problem. We have to take care of people that are in wheelchairs, and I'm not the best driver either in the world, and I know, I use those crosswalks over behind to walk my dog over behind the nick, and I'll get in the middle of one of those. People just run right through there. Usually they do stop when you're in that crosswalk, but I just think that's a product of being in Wyoming, unfortunately. But I'm glad you came down and told us about it. I like the citizens' comments. Mr. Steensland, I talked to your brother tonight and said, why didn't your brother run for for city council? He just looked at me. So I just think we ought to watch our money closer than we have, Mr. Mayor. That's my main message to everybody. There's probably nothing really wrong, but if there is, I want to find out.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Rowland, for bringing the non-motorized transportation plan to our attention again. We do get onto other things, and I think you're absolutely right that we should get a report on what has been implemented from that plan, which was extensive. It was actually the second non-motorized transportation plan undertaken by the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And I know there was a phasing system that we approved. And I know some of those things have been put in place, a good example being the bike path on Durban Street. But I think we should get an update on where are we with all of those things. My wife rides her bike from to and from work regularly, and it's a little scary, and she comes back with some pretty chilling stories of people playing chicken with her, et cetera. And it is a concern, and it is not just, it is a safety issue, of course, but it's also an economic development issue, because when we have a reputation for being an unsafe place for pedestrians, people pay attention to that, and people have choices as far as where they want to live. And I think the real problem is we just don't have enough people walking and biking, and so people just don't think to share those spaces because they don't see it. And so it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, but we need to get an update on what have we accomplished with implementing that plan. I agree that the Goodstein lease is a positive thing, but I'd like to point out that the city or the state has tripled the cost of that lease over the past 2 years, from $1 to $3. So we are getting gouged by the state once again. I will miss the CNFR event because I will be at the Wyoming Association of Municipalities Conference in Pinedale, so if someone would just let Roger know that I intended to be there, but just can't because I'll be in Pinedale. The last thing I want to mention is I was at the Davis Street Station Phase 2 grand opening a couple days ago. It was very cool. It was windy. But watching those kids wait for those sprinklers to come on and enjoy that, the space is so much bigger than I envisioned it being when I saw the plan on paper. And I think the mayor is correct that, and of course that is the hope, that this really becomes a destination that people don't just come down because there's a specific event. They just come down because, well, that's the place to hang out. And mom can get a cup of coffee, and kids can be in the splash pad, and then hopefully hang around, have lunch, have a beer, do whatever, you know. And it's just a positive environment, and I'm proud that the city did play a role in making that happen. And then just a small thing. You see these things on the consent resolutions, and some people wonder what these things are. The Wyoming Smart Capital Network is a consortium of cities that essentially help entrepreneurs pursue their dream when they don't have sufficient collateral. And there's a guarantee process. I can't remember all the details, where basically loans are given that have some backing by this consortium so that people who can't muster enough collateral through their personal resources can still move forward with their dream and hopefully contribute to our economy. So that's what that was all about. And I'll be in Pinedale next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just onto the comment, I think that Andrew had caught it, and I know I had. Young people make pretty dumb decisions sometimes. We were all there. And I have 2 young daughters, and they're teenagers. And if they ever ended up drinking in excess and passing out and were raped or assaulted, I would never look at them and I would never say, well, too bad, you shouldn't have been drinking. I am appalled by that comment by Mr. Rowland, to assume that that is the fault of somebody. We have law enforcement people here, we have lawyers in here, and to assume that because of somebody drinking, it's their fault. It's never their fault. It is a horrible, awful crime. You don't have to talk now, Mr. Rowland.
I didn't say fault.
That happens.
Excuse me, I did not say fault. I said a better decision. Don't misquote me. Fake news.
Have a good night, Mr. Rowland. We stand and we understand what that means. And we stand behind victims that happens to. Thank you. Next meetings of the City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30, Tuesday, June 12th, 2018 in the Council Meeting Room, and a regular Council meeting to be held at 6 p.m., Tuesday, June 19th, 2018 in the Council Chambers. Chair to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Meeting is adjourned.